Podcasters Roundtable, Round 36, National Podcast Day. The first National Podcast Day. And I think Dave's actually talking, but he's muted, so it looks very weird, but I won't let him throw me off. Dave's a master, so I got to bring up my game. Anyways, happy Podcast Day. The first, as I mentioned. Today, we're going to talk all about what that means and exactly what all of us can do to bring more attention to podcasting. Now, some of these guys, maybe most of them, have been streaming stuff all day long. And it's been a day-long celebration, hence the name, National Podcast Day, which we'll actually talk about. I'm gonna pin some people to the board on that one. You know, we like to stir it up a little bit here on the roundtable, if at all possible. But today, mainly, it's a celebration, right? And right now, on the roundtable, and I think we may even have a new roundtable. We'll have to find out. We have co-host Daniel and Dave is at a meetup group, so he's got a live audience. All right, so we're doing live inside of live. I don't know, it's interesting, and we have a returning roundtabler, Nick Seuberling, and the man of the hour, Mr. Steve Lee from NetCast Studio, is Spearheaded, the creator of National Podcast Day, and Dave Lee, his sidekick, or AKA his son. Those two have been going hard at this effort to raise awareness about podcasting, and so far it's been what I would call a huge success. I see a lot of awesome faces and voices in the chat room, and you guys rock as always, so you are joining us live to celebrate and to party it up. But let's do what's only appropriate and say thank you, Steve. Welcome. Maybe tell us briefly who you are for anyone who doesn't know. And thanks for starting National Podcast Day.
Well, the first thing I'd like to do is, this is certainly a celebration, and the event has been spectacular. There's things going on that we had no clue of. But, you know, with any kind of party or celebration, you have to have National Podcast Day champagne.
Haha.
Okay.
Toast. Fill me up.
So here you go, Ray.
Thank you. All right. Cheers, everybody.
And here's a toast to everybody that podcasting has been a part of this great, amazing event that for pretty much all day we have trended on Twitter, and it's just really been a great, great event. Salute.
Salute.
I'm sorry you guys don't have a drink.
Clink.
So, Dave, thank you. Your role, I think you've been out there pushing this all leading up to National Podcast Day, right? To the actual September 30th. And actually, could you tell us why it's today, September 30th?
Well, September 30th, it was... Oh, wait.
Wrong Dave. Go right ahead.
I'm sorry. We have two Daves. Hey, well, okay, so I'm sorry. New roundtabler, Dave Lee. Are you new? Is this your first roundtable?
This is my first roundtable, so I will default to any other Dave in the room.
Awesome. No, we did it. You are the guest of honor, and any other Dave is the most important Dave. So tell us, September 30th, why did we land on September 30th?
Well, I think Steve has the better story behind that. I mean, he was the one that was, that had the mind of, okay, there's National Pancake Day, there's National Senior Citizens Day, which I think he's a part of and really embraces every year. And so as he was driving down the road, something came on, hey, let's do this. And I think more than anything, it was initially a timing issue. It's like, okay, here's the idea. Let's plan it from a year on out. And I know that within the community he lives in, where the proclamation is made, it just happened to fall in the month of September, and September 30th is by default the day now.
Well, and then I was talking to Dave Jackson, and there actually ends up being an association, because from the investigation that I have done and with Dave, it appears September, October is actually the birth month. Dave might be able to fill us in a little more, but that's kind of why we picked it.
Yeah, I'm not sure where I read it or what I heard, but some old story that Adam Curry and Dave Weiner, that's basically when they really got the gist of the whole RSS enclosure thing going. So it was the birth of podcasting.
Yeah, how many years ago was that?
that would be 10.
10 years. Yeah.
All right. So a good year to start it. We've hit 10 years old, right? A decade of podcasting. And I think, let's see, Dave, have you been here since the start? Dave, probably the oldest. I call him the OG podcaster all the time. But Dave, you probably have the most history in podcasting. What year did you start?
April 4th, 2005.
Oh, he has the day. Does everyone else know what day? Now, wait, hold on. How are you calculating that? Is that the day you showed up in iTunes? Is that the day you published on your website? What is that?
That is the date of my very first Musicians Cooler podcast. So that's the day that one went public. So
Posted in a feed, not necessarily on iTunes. Or
posted
was it
in a feed. Because yeah, before that I had audio on the internet. It wasn't technically a podcast. It was just audio. So.
Nice. Steve, when did you start podcasting?
I've never done one in my life.
Oh, well, and that's why we're here, people, to raise awareness and get more people podcasting.
That is my point. Actually, we started in 2007.
All right. And Daniel, when did you start?
My first published episode is on my website, marked as October 10th, 2007, but I actually published an episode a couple months before that, just renamed it, rebranded it, re-recorded it, republished it, and I'm trying to find that date, but basically summer, fall of 2007.
Yeah. And Nick, are you the baby of the group?
Actually, no. My first podcast I ever published was August 2005.
Wow. Wait.
Whoa.
What was secret podcast there? What
It
podcast
lasted,
was that?
No kidding, 7 episodes, The Threshold.
Nice.
And this was before there was things like WordPress that made it easy to do your own RSS. And so I had to hand write my own XML code. That was part of the reason why that didn't last long.
Nice, nice. And I am right in that late 06, early 07, depending on how you categorize it, area. So, heck, maybe I'm the latecomer. Who knows? But let's talk about what the heck. Actually, let's get to something first. I want to do a couple things. I want to play Stump the Roundtabler, okay, or Stump the Roundtable. So as we're going along, because if you go to nationalpodcastday.com, you'll see there's a trivia section. So for you in the chat room, those watching live, if you toss in a trivia question, we will see if you can stump the roundtable, right? So a podcasting trivia question, right? I don't care what the Jersey Shore showed last week, or if that show's even still on. Pop culture. I think Daniel can answer that one, but no, I'm kidding. Podcasting trivia question. Throw that in there. We'll see. We'll have some fun with it. Maybe we can see if we can trick anyone or stump the roundtabler. So we'll go back to that. You guys keep your eyes peeled in the chat room for trivia questions. And I also wanted to do... in the spirit of Podcast Day, I think one of the things we want to do is introduce new people to podcasting, right? And one of the best ways to do that is to tell them what your favorite podcast is, or tell them about a show that you're listening to that they may enjoy. And I thought we could all start off really quick kind of going with Dave's last 5 and 5 thing that he has at the School of Podcasting, but we'll just do the most recent podcast that you started listening to that you're enjoying. And I'm going to go first so someone can't take mine, because I'm loving this brand new show called Startup, and is, I guess, technically you could call it a podcast about podcasting, but it's Alex Bloomberg from, he's a producer of This American Life, and he has gone on to create his own podcasting company, which is basically a network of shows that he wants to do, and he's taking us on an incredibly intimate trip where he's recording the whole process. So if you're not listening to Startup and you are interested in podcasting and podcast and the business behind it, check out Startup. It's kind of like it's a mini series, sort of. I think he said it's going to be 6 to 8 episodes. It's going to be short, according to him. Hopefully it goes on, and it's really hyper produced, right? It's with the producer of This American Life, so it's got a lot of audio production on it, and it feels almost like an original series coming out of Netflix or something. That's how much fun I am having listening to the show. So check out Startup. This audience here who's watching the roundtable will really enjoy it. But Daniel, why don't you expose the audience, anyone listening, to a new podcast that they might want to check out?
Well, I've been trying to focus more on my business lately and more ways to convert casual visitors to actual connections and relationships, building my business in more connected long-term ways. So I'm not just looking for the quick buck or trying to get rich. And one of the ways that I've been learning that is from the podcast called Conversion Cast, hosted by Tim Page from Lead Pages. I recently purchased Lead Pages and met Tim in person at Podcast Movement. And the podcast is all about converting things, converting people to customers, visitors to customers, how to engage them in fun, attractive, interesting ways that aren't just all of this marketing hype and gimmicks and spam kind of techniques, but actual ways that you are providing value and at the same time building authority while converting people to become customers or maybe just consistent connections. That's Conversion Cast with Tim Page.
Awesome. Yeah, and I saw him speak at Podcast Movement. He claimed it was his first time speaking, but he did a great job, and that was a great talk.
The house.
Yeah, he
I've
rocked
heard
the house.
So many great comments about his session.
Yeah, it was really good. If you have the virtual ticket, go and check out that. I think you can still buy a Podcast Movement virtual ticket. But all right, Dave, what about a podcast you've been enjoying lately?
I was thinking about this, and it sounds really weird, but I thought about this one that makes me smile every time I hear it. I don't get a huge amount of info from it. They're usually pretty short, but they definitely make you smile, and it's the way I feel when I get done with it that I love. It's Porter's Podcast. This is Rob Walsh's 5-year-old kid, and he will answer any question you send him. And my favorite thing was, I asked him if he thought the Cavaliers had a chance now that LeBron was back in town. And he researched it in the whole 9 yards. And at the end, he said, "I'm sorry I haven't put out more episodes. He had problems with his producer." So it was great to hear him throw his dad right under the bus. It was excellent. So that's one that, for me right now, every time, it doesn't come out very often because, again, he's got a problem with his producer. But every time I hear it, I just smile ear to ear because it's just hilarious.
Awesome. Nick, what have you been enjoying?
That's funny that you mentioned that, Dave. I did a show like that with my son. He was at the time 3, and he quit on me. So I had a problem with the talent. The show that I've been listening to recently, I probably started listening to this probably around June. I was actually fortunate enough as a birthday present to get stock in Apple when they made their stock split. And so I've been taking a little more interest in their business, although I don't own a Apple computer at all. But with the computer issues I've had over the past month, I'm certainly leaning more towards it. So I've been listening to MacBreak Weekly on the Twit Network. I've been a big fan of that. And with all the iOS stuff and all the iPhone news that's been going on over the past month, that's something I've really been interested in. So MacBreak Weekly.
Awesome. Dave, since you are sitting next to Nick, technically. Not technically.
Virtually.
Yeah, the podcast I've been listening to lately, and it's not a tech podcast. It's not a podcast about podcasting. It's not business. It's about soccer, and I've grown over the past 3-4 years into a big soccer fan, both domestically here in the States and internationally. And so one of the shows I've been really digging is Soccer Morning and the SBI show, and it takes all things English soccer, American soccer, and Soccer Morning's great because I can get a full hour and a half analysis of what's going on in the league every day, and just being that I've dove into that and I'm really enjoying it. That's the default show I go to every morning that I look forward to.
Awesome. Steve?
Well, the first thing I would say, we all need to chip in and buy Ray a mic stand, number one.
Oh, no. You're missing that.
It's been too long for a podcaster about podcasting to not have a boom.
We're not turning around this ship. This is
watch
it is
me.
sailed,
You
man.
watch me.
This is a rock and roll show, Steve. We have booze and microphones, and there's probably 1 or 2 fans in the audience.
Well, if somebody wants to give me $50 and put a link of their show into the chat room, I'll say that podcast. Okay. Actually, you're all going to think I'm sucking up here. I am. But as I get older, my attention span goes too, which maybe it's been that way my whole life. However, the show I really enjoy, and thank goodness we finally got a new episode out, is Dave's Weekly Web Tools.
Really?
Love it.
Thank you, my friend.
You're welcome. I really appreciate it. And I'll tell you why, because it's short, sweet, precise, and gives me the tools that I need to assist me, whether it's business, personal, or whatever the case. And I really appreciate the in-depth you know, the way you go about and actually spend money on a lot of times to test out these things to see if they're even worth a hoot. And I appreciate that because you're saving me money.
That's it. Yeah, that is one of my most expensive podcasts. Because I find these great tools and then I go, oh crap, now I got to buy it. So that's always not a good thing.
All right, so go share a podcast with a friend or a stranger. You know, one of the things that we had hoped to have is I wanted to put together a video, and this is where the audience can actually help because there's no reason to not submit these, right? We want you to go out, grab your smartphone, okay, and there, hey, Nick, I'm investing in your future, buddy, okay, iPhone 6.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Go out, grab your smartphone, put it in landscape mode. You don't have to, but it looks better. I'm a video guy. Just ask someone one simple question. Walk up to anybody. What's your favorite podcast? And we'll see what kind of reaction we get. That's the task I'm putting out there. We can get a video. I want to edit something together. I have something in mind. It'll be a lot of fun, and it'll help promote National Podcast Day. Now, Steve, you mentioned proclamation. What is that about?
The proclamation is actually the official formulation of a day. And it started here in the grassroots within my community and has grown to up to the state level, which hasn't been actually finalized yet. We're still working on that. So we have that intact. And the intent behind it was to give us a little backbone, a little bit of merit to what we were doing. We have plans for next year to certainly expand what we're doing, so we're going to kind of have to think about what we're going to do in terms of the proclamation. But really, it's kind of the articles of what we're about. And I think that's the real importance of it. And you can find it on the website under the media task. There's a link there, a PDF. You can actually bring it up. And I think a lot of the verbiage and what it really says for us in terms of podcasters and what we should be doing with community should be very important to everyone.
Yeah, so why don't you tell us along those lines exactly what are we celebrating? What is National Podcast Day?
It's a good question that's been asked a million times, and I think the real simple answer from my perspective is our tagline, start the conversation. And what National Podcast Day is truly about is getting out and evangelizing what we're doing in terms of podcasting, because I think collectively we think it is the upcoming medium in terms of how people are going to get their content. And it's important that as community, and even if it's only one day a year, that we go, yeah, hoorah, I'm behind it. But the most important factor behind what we're doing, I think, a lot of times we talk internally to other podcasters, but we don't get external from our groups in a lot of ways about what it is. And I think one of the most objective parts of this is to get out and tell people there is a thing called podcasts. Here's what they're about. Here's how to get them. Get involved, because then you're going to be hooked. On TV, you're not going to find specific TV programming on perhaps something that you're really interested in. And here's an avenue and a gateway to be able to find content that you really have a passion about and to get involved with.
Awesome. And what did September 30th is here? People have been hashtagging all day. What did we want people to do on today, September 30th? And actually, well, we'll save the other part.
You know, it's very interesting because, you know, when we initially launched, we had various suggestions that you could do in terms of if you're a podcaster or a listener or whatever the case may be. But the more open statement was use your imagination, come up with ideas. And I'll tell you, the communities have. We actually started to document what various people were doing on National Podcast Day, but the list started getting so massive we couldn't track it anymore. People are really doing amazing things, and Dave can probably talk more to more specifics of that, but people are coming up with their own ideas on how to celebrate. And I think that's a real important aspect of this, is it's not about focusing on this website or the day, but using the event as a stepping stone to do what you want to do with it.
Yeah, Dave, so what have you seen, Dave Lee, what have you seen out there people doing to celebrate
there's an interesting mix out there with what they're doing. The number one thing I've seen trolling and watching the Twitter feed is that everybody is recommending what shows they're listening to, what podcasts they're subscribed to. Almost what we did at the first part of here was suggest it. And we've seen a number of tweets about that. And then the follow-up was a lot of podcasters saying, hey, it's National Podcast Day. We'd love to hear a review or a rating or something like that. And then I've also seen a lot of people comment that say, hey, I listened to this podcast. I think it's great, or I provided a review or an email to the podcaster in which I enjoy listening to. So I think those were the 2 or 3 main things. I do know that there were people that were launching their new podcast networks this week. I know some people that had shows that have kind of gone in retirement. They're bringing those back. And so it was cool. The day kind of gave them that little energy, that little kick to be like, okay, now it's time to do it. The statement has been made. I want to do what I want to do on Podcast Day, and that's exactly what Steve said. Is we open it up and say, what do you guys want to do? We had podcasters talking about their milestones, like Gamertag Radio mentioned that they had over 500,000 downloads in 9 months. That was their big milestone statement for today, and they shared that with their audience and thanked them for everything. So, like Steve said, it's hard to keep track of everything, but I think the majority of supporting had come from, this is one of my favorite podcasts, you need to subscribe.
Yeah, I mean, follow the National Podcast Day. Is that just at National Podcast Day? Is that what it is on Twitter?
At NTL Podcast Day.
NTL Podcast Day. I've been following along and seeing all the tweets and the retweets of the different things that people are doing. A lot of people saved their episode. They're like, I saved it till 12 a.m. September 30th to correspond with Podcast Day. So they're into it.
That's something I forgot to add in. A lot of people said, hey, we usually record on a Thursday. We're recording earlier, or we're going to record in advance so it's ready for you guys, 6 a.m., 8 a.m. for you guys to start consuming. So that's another good point.
A couple trivia questions rolling in here. Ms. Eileen Smith, her question number 3. She's got a bunch in the chat, so you guys should go check those out and see if you can all answer them. But she says, how many primary podcast categories does iTunes have? And then she actually gave us multiple choice, so you can start off pretty easy here. 14, 16, or 18. Who thinks they absolutely know the answer? Nick?
I just took the quiz. I'm not going to lie. So I got a 7 out of 10, so I know the answer, but I won't say it.
You're DQ'd.
But I won't. Yeah, I won't say
Is
it.
that from the? Is that also? Some of these questions might be actually from. You should go to nationalpodcast.com and take the trivia quiz. I'm glad that I didn't get 10 out of 10 when I did it, because it means you learn something new, right? And it means the quiz is not sandbagging. It's a tough quiz. So, Daniel, come on. How many primary podcast categories does iTunes have?
I already took this quiz, but my first guess, I'll tell you my first guess, 18.
That's what mine was too, yeah.
And that is wrong.
Incorrect.
Yeah.
What's the answer?
16.
I was going to say, I think it's 16.
All right. Well, kudos for admitting. I mean, this is one roundtable that we should be able to get that right in theory, right? But it doesn't mean we have an encyclopedic knowledge of all podcasting. We will talk about the history, and even though Dave has been there before they started podcasting and should have cataloged everything in his show notes, we'll forgive him.
We should mention what right now for National Podcast Day.
Well, I mentioned he's got a meetup group. He's got a live. If that's what you're talking about, he's in front of a live audience. Why don't you flip the camera around? Let me put the thing on. If you're on the round table, you have to wave. So we need a big waves from the crowd.
I can't see and wave. There we go.
Now,
yeah, we got let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 people. Here's the beautiful thing. Am I talking into a dead microphone?
No.
Most of these people do not have podcasts.
Awesome.
That's cool. They're all like, hey, I'm getting ready to get started, and they're thinking about it, and it's very, very cool. So that's exciting.
That's who we want to be talking to on National Podcast Day. We want to talk to people. What's your favorite podcast? When you ask them that, and they go, what's a podcast? Because guess what? It's still going to happen plenty. Okay, yeah. You're still going to get that response. You can ask them what YouTube is. They're going to know. It's the Kleenex of video. But what a podcast? We're not quite there. So no subtext on that at all. I love YouTube. But yeah, what's a podcast? And when people say, hopefully you'll then introduce them to the concept without actually overwhelming them to the point where they're like, I don't want to do that. I have to go where and download what, right? So it's a little easier these days, right? I talked about on interview the other day, we had talked about the different sort of, I don't know if you want to call it like mile markers we've had in podcasting. And the smartphone, when that came in, we saw a little bit of what Fred was calling, Fred Castaneda in the chat room. He was talking about the different renaissances that we've had, right? And the smartphone, I think, is one of them because it did make it easier. We didn't have to, we no longer were necessarily tethered to iTunes and putting our iPods into our computer. We could go to an app and stream something off a website or download. And that's, I think the next one is getting into cars. And hopefully, once we're in cars and it's easy to punch up as your favorite radio station, your favorite radio station. Come on, who has a favorite radio station? When it's that easy, then hopefully, when you ask somebody what's a podcast, it'll be that much easier. I mean, where do we see, what's National Podcast Day? What's the ultimate goal? I mean, we are here to celebrate podcasting. We want to introduce new people, but where do we think podcasting is going, and how can National Podcast Day usher that along?
I think if nothing else, just it gets people that go, okay, really, I've heard the word podcast 8 billion times. I've got to go figure out what the heck everybody's talking about. Because if you can get the general public feeling like they're missing something, if they go, okay, I keep hearing about this, I should probably figure out what this is. I think that's a big one. Just to poke them one more time. If you haven't clicked on that, then ask somebody about it. And if we're the person that says, hey, like we said, start the conversation. So to me, I think that's a big part of it. Just trying to just moving it forward just a little bit and get that momentum going, maybe just a pinch faster. I mean, we've come a long way in 10 years. It'd be kind of nice if didn't take 10 years to get into the living room. It'd be nice if we could speed it up a little bit.
I've actually had it happen twice today where people ask me what is a podcast, and this is what today is all about: sharing and forwarding what we do, what podcasting is. So I to be able to spread the word and introduce people to something as great as podcasting, that to me is what today is all about.
Yeah, Jason Norris in the chat room says, somewhat ironically, he shared the final episode of his podcast, Learning to teach.info/12. So, podcasting, it's not easy. And I think that you are seeing more and more people get into podcasting, and that's good, right? And bigger names coming into podcasting. And if it is confusing or you're having trouble, keeping going, someone mentioned the magic in episode number 7. Was it Nick or Dave? You said that people were, inspired by National Podcast Day, and they're either relaunching their show or it's pushing them, sort of giving that final kick out the door, right, to keep going. What are we going to do? What is National Podcast Day as a resource going to do to keep people motivated? Because and as well to assist people who are maybe struggling with, hey, I don't have time to put this out, or the way I'm doing it is too hard. Maybe you can help me with workflow. I know the website, nationalpodcastday.com, there are some resources there, and I imagine that'll only continue to grow, right, Steve?
Yeah, Steve is going to continue to build that website, and we're going to be reorganizing it and stuff to make it flow a little bit easier based on what we've seen throughout the last month. And you're right that the National Podcast Day account, whether it's the Facebook page or Twitter account, Google Plus, what we've talked about moving forward with this is you just can't plug podcasting like day in and day out like I've done on that account for the last 3.5 weeks, So we're going to turn it into a resource hub. We're going to say what is working for you, and if we have other podcasters saying, man, I can't get feedback from my audience, or my audio's doing this, or I can't get my video, or I'm having a problem with this, we can, as the infrastructure of National Podcast Day, direct them to somebody within our space and just be that centralized resource hub, and we can filter that and we can maintain it. And I think there's a lot of positivity by doing that. There's a place to go. There's someone that's listening, and yeah, I may not know the answer, Steve might not know the answer, but somebody in our space does. And so I think, as I was talking to Nick earlier on our live broadcast, is that it's exactly what this has done. It's kind of kicked people forward to say, you know what, I can improve my product, I can improve my listenership, I can improve my feedback. You know what, podcasting is hard, but it's better. I better get behind that mic because I miss it. So I think the whole idea behind it is, one, continue to engage with those that don't know about it. And for me, personally, I try and tout the convenience of podcasting now. What is podcast? 3 sentences, tell them what it is. Say, let me see your phone. Open up any one of the apps, the native app, download something for them. Just say, search for what you want. You can find a podcast. So I think, as we mentioned, Dave Jackson, you said it's in our homes. Ray, you said it's going to be in our cars soon. It's in our pockets. And so I think as we promote the ease and convenience of podcasting, that's what we can continue to drive with this National Podcast Day account.
Guys, one of the things I think that's important, besides starting the conversation when it comes to this event, is we have to continue the conversation. And by doing so, we're going to not only keep people's attention, but continue to build community and resources and avenue. There are so many people that, and as you guys know, that are scared to ask for help. And we're hoping to provide that resource. But the other thing is, if we only do this starting a week before this event every week, it's worthless. So we have to have this, not as the hype it is, but as a source for people to either direct or provide them what they need.
Awesome. I was also going to have a little bit of fun. So when a question is tossed to you or when you participate, you are now required to look at maybe one of the last 4 people who chatted in the chat room and call out their name. Can you name their podcast, right? Because one of the most important things to do as a podcaster is to get to know your audience. So, yeah, I mean, I'm probably not going to be able to name most of them. But as I stare at my screen right now, I got Steve Stewart, moneyplansos.com, right? Great podcast. He's going to be stoked about that. Michael Schmidt, I think, is the first time he's joining us. He actually is a host for a podcast that I work on at work called This Week in Microbiology. So microbiologists go, it's funny because we have people from all walks of life who enjoy that one. It's a really great show. Of course, a little plug for my work podcast there. Fred Castaneda is in the chat room. He's got the Podcast Reporter. Dave Jackson doesn't count. And so Dave Jackson's got maybe one of the better podcasts out there called Podcasters Roundtable. I enjoy that one a lot. And so check that out. But so as you go along with the remaining half hour we have here, I want to see you grab someone from the chat room and shout out their podcast, because again, we're sharing podcasts today and we're introducing new people, and we have such a great range of people who join us with all kinds of interest. And according to Tristan in the chat room, he says the vast majority of people who know it's National Podcast Day are podcasters. He hates to burst our bubble, but that is the point, right? The point is, yes, we know it's National Podcast Day. It's the first one. Steve created it. He's here working hard to do that on his free time, and now it's our job to let people who aren't podcasters know about podcasting, right? Again, and I think what we've kind of been talking about is sharing either your favorite episode, your favorite show. Maybe you have a friend who, friends tend to like what we like. There is usually some common interest there. And they may not necessarily listen to a podcast. Some friends, you might have friends and family who don't even know you produce a podcast. So start there, right? Tell your dog. Put some earbuds in his ear. Maybe he'll go out and do some promotion for you. But yeah, the point is to share it with those who don't know what podcasting is. And I think we kind of talked a little bit about that as still a hurdle to overcome. So we're getting there, and thanks, Tristan, for joining us. And everybody else, let's see. Let's talk a little bit about... Oh, wait. Eileen's got a question. It's question 11, so you got to check the chat room. She is just flowing there. I think these might be coming off the website, so... I don't know. I think all of us will have the answers to these. But how many active podcasts... Oh, this one isn't on the website. How many active podcasts does Dave Jackson have? 2, 5, or 17?
The answer is too many.
Too many.
Yeah.
When you can't count, when you need a multiple choice, it's too many.
I don't know the answer to that one.
Active.
We'll define active, right. Wow.
I would guess
I'm assuming
5.
Eileen knows. Yeah, I'm going to go with 5, too. Right. It seems like it's probably a trick question. Dave, since we talked to you and you get to go ahead and grab someone who I didn't mention, hopefully you see someone in the chat room. And you know what? You don't have to know what their podcast is. Just name, shout out, and that person can put their podcast in the chat room. Anyone can put their podcast in the chat room. But go ahead and list it if Dave calls you out. Dave, let's talk a little bit more about the history. We talked about it's 10 years. Tell us, you were there with the dinosaurs. Tell us a little bit about the origins of podcasting. How did podcasting come about?
Back in the day, it was Adam Curry and Dave Weiner are pretty much tribute. First of all, blindfaithlive.com is here in the Cleveland Podcasters Meetup. And what's the table? What's your website? OnTheTablePodcast.com.
Awesome.
Are here at the meetup. So that's who I'm shouting out. Dave Weiner and Adam Curry. Basically, Dave invented or perfected the RSS feed, and from what I understand, Adam perfected moving the audio onto a player, if I understand that correctly. And at that point, I remember seeing a news report, forever ago, it seems like, and they were talking about this on the news, and it didn't make any sense, and I just thought Adam Curry was nuts. I'm like, he's going to try to replace radio. Why would you do that? And then next thing I know, it's 2004, and a friend of mine says, hey, there's this new buzzword, and it got word of the year from whatever dictionary thing that was, and it just started to grow. It was so slow to get the ball rolling at first because it was really hard to subscribe to a podcast. But that's where it came from, and who knew that Adam Curry was such a big geek, and he's writing code and all this other stuff, and he was one of the main podcasts at the beginning. He did a show called The Daily Source Code, and it was originally for coders, and then it just became this big pod. It was almost like the podcast reporter before there was Fred Castaneda. He would just give the latest news, and that worked great until he started a podcast company, and then he quit talking about the other companies. It became very focused at that point. So,
Daniel, why don't you pick up the flag and run for Dave and maybe talk about the next major stage in podcasting and whatever that means to you. And I think we got to about 2005 there. We had it was the word of the year. I believe 2005 is correct. And of course, pick out somebody and
Well, I think one of the things that made it...
Oh, no, hold on.
Pick out somebody. Sean Smith. I recognized him because I've had his business card on my desk for quite a while. Sean, your business card has been scanned 12 times and sent to the Evernote support team, just FYI. Not because it's your business card, but because I discovered a bug in Evernote and your business card was the great candidate to scan. But he hosts the Mobile Pro. I was a guest on that. Actually, I'm not sure if he launched it yet. I can't remember, but it's themobilepro.net. Anyway, so picking up 2005, part of what contributed to the word podcast being the word of the year was the big attention that it got with the launch of iTunes 4.9 in summer of 2005.
Oh, I think you just answered a trivia question, too. Yeah. Ms. Eileen asked which version of iTunes, and 4.9 was a multiple choice answer, so we'll say you win.
Yeah. I knew that one when I took the quiz. I got that one right. The introduction of podcasts into iTunes is what made podcasts so much more consumable that it got a lot more attention because iTunes had been around for a while, and iTunes was really popular for the place you go to get this music, and more entertainment options were coming very soon as well. And they announced that you could get podcasts there. So here was an app that a lot of people already had, and it made getting podcasts a lot easier, a lot more interesting, and you didn't have to worry about RSS feeds. You could just search, click subscribe, and it's been wonderfully that simple since then. Mostly that simple.
Wonderfully simple. Nick, why don't you give us, you were there apparently hiding in the early days. Give us a little bit of a podcasting history as you remember it, and please pick out a show and a...
Well, I don't see him chiming in as far as the chatter goes, but I do see him listed as one of the people watching. And his name's Jason Bryant. He's a former Roundtabler as well. And he launched his podcast today, a wrestling podcast about Virginia Tech and their wrestling program there. And so kudos to him for launching his show here on National Podcast Day.
And once a roundtabler, always a roundtabler,
That's
Nick.
right.
Until you get to 9 appearances, and then you never come back again, because we know what happens.
I'm halfway there.
I'm not counting.
Okay. The big thing I would say, Daniel mentioned '05 with the launch of iTunes 4.9. From there, I think the WordPress getting involved and becoming more easily to use, easy to install. There was other sites like Movable Type. That was a podcast, or I guess you can call it a website or a service that I used in '07. Take that back, '08, when I launched my second podcast, and that still was easier in the sense that it created your own RSS for you, but it was still not very podcast friendly. And so I would say WordPress and Movable Type, and even something like Blogspot made it easier for you to create your own XML and have your own RSS feed.
Awesome. And Fred was asking who's the oldest podcaster and how many years of age, but he answered it. I don't know if any of us are going to get there. We were all at Podcast Movement, but apparently, 82-year-old woman published an episode in 2014, and he said he learned that at Podcast Movement. Now, this one's easy, right? I mean, if you are over the age of 82, record something and hit publish. But you got to put it in a feed, so that might make it a little difficult, but it's open. It's open. There's a lot of people out there. And hopefully we have, let's talk a little bit about here on National Podcast Day, who are we seeing? Who are podcasters currently? Steve, when you interact with podcasters, are you seeing more young people? Are they... now I say our age, so clearly not young, or older. Who's consuming? Who's producing? Is there a difference?
From what I have seen, certainly I think the listener base is from the younger to the 30s and 40s. But when it comes to podcasting themselves, I sort of see that. That sweet spot in terms of the demographics, probably the 30 to 40 age range. I don't see, now, maybe it's because of what I see. Maybe people see it a different way, but I see most podcasters within that realm. Not a lot of younger guys podcasting, from what I see.
And clearly we need to get young people podcasting, right? Dave, what do you... You listen to a 5-year-old do a podcast, so
now most of it is kind of like Steve said, 30 to 40. I did meet some millennials at the Podcast Movement that were doing an entrepreneur show, which was rather different. But a lot of times I'm sitting in front of Billy Delaney, and he's retired. He's got a rich life that he's led so far, and he's got things to say. And I'm finding that's a lot of times the case. It's the people that, hey, the kids are getting old, they're off to school, I'm tired of golf, and I'm going to hop on the internet and share my experience. So I think that's what I'm seeing a lot of.
So you start a YouTube channel when you're like 10, and then when you're 30, you start a podcast, right?
That's it.
You cover the whole gamut. If you're good, you do both, right? Hey, let's get a little controversial, and the only pushback I've seen, everyone absolutely loves National Podcast Day. People are saying great idea, good job, excellent execution. Nick's laughing. I guess he knows where I'm going. I mean, what could it be? I don't even have to say it. What's the one controversy you've seen?
Can I answer this?
No.
Well,
you're going to.
I guess. Now I'm kind of confused. Maybe it's one of two things. But
what do you think it is, Nick?
I have a feeling maybe the word international may be involved.
Let's talk about the name. The name.
Just when you think you got it perfect.
Hey, this is year one, right? Nothing should be perfect, or maybe it is perfect, and we just need to explain a little better. Steve, obviously you've heard this feedback, right? People have asked, what is National Podcast Day? What nation? Who's behind it? What about global or international Podcast Day? Do you think that's an evolution? World Podcast Day? Is that an evolution of what we're doing here, or is it going to remain National Podcast Day? And then maybe tell us a little bit about the evolution of the name.
When we first decided to do this, there was no intention to exclude anyone.
Of course not.
It was a worldwide event. And from my perspective, everybody is a nation. And so we went that way. But as the movement started to move, certainly we got questions about it. We actually got very vulgar, nasty emails saying, you know, who in the heck are you? Why aren't you waving your flag then? And there's a bunch of BS. You know, some of that can be excluded, but there are valid points with it. Although I also do believe no matter what kind of naming convention you come up with, you're going to have people question whatever.
Says the netcaster.
I'm not a netcaster. I'm a podcaster. That's just my website name.
I'm just messing with you.
I know you are.
I have to. What people don't know is I have to buy a beer. I have to buy Steve a beer every time I mess with him. So it costs me money.
Well, I've got cases out here.
I know.
But the thing is that we have never announced, proclaimed, said anything that this is a U.S.-only event. It's just, for some reason, been interpreted that way.
Yeah, and I don't, you know, I can see how it would happen, right? I mean, podcasts do seem to be, the U.S. is the dominant place where podcasts are coming out of, right? I think the U.S. would still lead in podcasts produced and probably consume.
But we do have members of the team in various other countries and whatever.
Sure, and you know what? I think there is one more. Rick, I believe, has helped on this as well, right? You might want
Rick has helped. The UK group. We have some people in Germany and Switzerland.
So the burning question, though, are we going to change the name, or is it staying?
I will go ahead and officially announce to you that we will be rebranded to International Podcast Day for next year.
Hey, look at that! We're breaking news. I think. Have you actually said that today somewhere?
No, we haven't.
Wow.
Yeah, no, and that's the thing. Steve and I I've filtered a lot of the comments through the Twitter and the Facebook comments, and it's just the question, why isn't international? And then you know, I say, hey, we understand that podcasts come from 100 different countries. I mean, Nick said earlier that his show is downloaded in 123 different countries, so it truly is a global podcasting community, and that was never our intent. And we even talk about, you know, we're promoting it worldwide. So it's, I think the first year go round, if that is the one critique and the one thing that we need to think about, improve, change, rebrand, whatever you want to call it, I'll take that, you know. So it's just an explanation. It's just we never meant it. We love you guys. We have people supporting from every different time zone. So yeah, International Podcast Day. Yep.
I guess when you're dealing with the internet too, and this is just my take, it's already kind of assumed that it's worldwide. It's the World Wide Web.
Yeah.
So I guess I don't see why people take such umbrage at the name national versus international. But
it's the bloody Americans. They think they own everything. Roy, you don't.
It is what it is, but it gets me on the front of Time magazine. I'm cool.
Yeah, exactly. And isn't that kind of just the epitome of podcasting? And it goes to show, you can put out a show, and 99 people will love it. There's always going to be that one dentist that doesn't recommend, you know, so you can't please everybody.
Dave Jackson making dentist the enemy all around the globe. International dentists were coming after you. Yeah, you know what? Yeah, we're on the internet, right? There's always going to be critical feedback. But I think, you know, that's really the only thing. And I think it's more of, you know, of course you see bad comments. That happens all the time. But there's also a legit question there, right? And I think just something that we wanted to have some clarification on, and we've got the people here. This is a lot of work, right? So it is absolutely ridiculous from your free time to it's not criticizing so much as I think it's constructive feedback, except for the one or two examples. And we're podcasters, we're content creators online. I think we have dealt with that stuff.
You know, with anything, it's about approach, and it's about context and how you deliver a message. And some of them weren't very nice, but we hear everybody, and we're going to make that move towards that direction.
That is awesome. So here we go. We're already growing. We are first day of the first official podcast day, National Podcast Day, International Podcast Day. Uh-oh. We got to change some branding. We'll stick with National Podcast Day. You know what? My favorite thing is the hashtag has been Podcast Day on Twitter, which I love because I can put like Happy Podcast Day. I can put a lot of things around hashtag Podcast Day. That's been fun. And I've seen it just, it's blowing up. I think, Dave, did you say we broke the Twitters? No fail whales anymore, but...
Yeah, I woke up at 5:20 this morning, checked it, and it was trending. You know, at 5:20 a.m. So it was cool to see. Yeah.
Stitcher just tweeted saying, "Happy National #Podcast Day."
Yeah, we got it right.
And
Awesome,
they
they got
put
it
a
right.
photo along with
Thank
it.
you,
Said,
Stitcher. That's
"Podcasts
awesome.
equal
Glad they came
life."
through after a month of bugging them.
And who would have thought that we'd be skipping down the yellow brick road hand in hand with Blog Talk Radio?
Hard to
I'm gonna let
believe.
Dave address that.
Dave
Yeah,
is all hugs and kisses.
When I met the guys at Podcast Movement,
Met is an interesting way to put it because I
Yeah.
met them too.
and turned out they went and said, you know what, you're right, our audio's awful, we have a lot of room to grow. And even today, when I went to blogtalkradio.com, I was really expected to be met with a bunch of audio playing videos. And when I went there weren't any. I was really surprised. So they are starting to move things in a different direction. And right there at the top, a giant banner that said, congratulations, whatever it was, National Podcast Day. And I was like, well, that's kind of cool. So, yeah, they've been promoting it and have been reaching out a lot basically since that meeting.
Yeah, no, so I made a joke there, and it's obviously a little inside if you don't know, but the new, I don't know if he's the CEO. What's his position? What's his name, Dave?
Andy Toe is the Blog Talk Radio guy, I think is what it says on his card.
Okay. Well, he
General
approached
manager,
us.
maybe?
Yeah, okay. He approached us at Podcast Movement, stepped in front of me, knew who I was without my name badge, and as Dave was familiar with this experience, we both thought, should we duck now, right? Because we've all had critical feedback for Blog Talk Radio, and well-deserved, but huge kudos to them for attending an event like Podcast Movement, approaching us, listening. I couldn't believe they knew who we were. They are listening now, so they're making changes. So, as podcast grows, more and more companies and organizations realize the power of podcasting, how important it is, and it sounds like they're going to up their game. So hopefully we'll see that, and they've supported Podcast Day here really well. And like you said, big splash of banners. Steve, why don't you talk a little bit about who's supported you? How did you get in touch with Blog Talk and Stitcher? Did you just send an email? What do other people do if they, podcasters, they want to promote their big day?
Each one of these was a little bit different in terms of the approach to contact them because based on organizational structure or whatever I could find on the web. But, our primary sponsor, Servant, who has provided absolutely incredible hosting services for us on their Fire SSD systems, has just been remarkable. And, until the end of today, you can get 50% off the first 2 months of hosting. So if you're interested in that, please go to the sponsor's website or the sponsor link on the website. When it comes to Blog Talk Radio, we got an email from, what's his name?
Mike Russell?
No,
it
from
was,
Blog Talk.
Adam?
Andy Toe.
Andy.
He's
And
the
he
general
said-
manager and chief architecture.
So he's the one that has been conversing with Dave about Blog Talk Radio and these kinds of things. He said, I see what's going on and you guys are involved. We want to help promote. So after that discussion happened, they turned me over to their marketing people. We spent, about a week working out various scenarios and graphics and approaches and promos. And boy, did they come involved. To include playing the promo on 100,000 shows, and it goes on and on. So they've been a great supporter. And then there's other organizations and individuals that have been involved. I really need to thank Ray because none of this would be possible. The other one is the UK Podcasters Group, which Mike and his group over there in the UK have been amazing. Podcasters Roundtable, Two Thumbs Up Media, which is a podcast directory. Podcast Movement, where we announced that this event was going to happen in August. John Lee Dumas and his organization with Podcasters Paradise were phenomenal today. John and his group really came through. Of course, I have to thank Sarah, Nick's wife, for all the graphics that she did. And it's been amazing. But most importantly, number one, to this group of people that assisted me in launching this event. And I have to thank everybody in social media that has just wrapped their arms around this, embraced it, And honestly, I am overwhelmed with what happened today, and I couldn't be happier.
All right, no tears, Steve. We know you're a crier.
He had a couple earlier. You know,
That's
when the
alright.
cameras were off, I had a little tissue here, and I was taking care of the old man.
Hey, Dave. Maybe pull the champagne away from him.
That's
okay?
true. Yeah,
All right.
champagne does make
These
him a
things
little
are really
emotional.
tiny.
The party's winding down. Of course, we are on the West Coast, so we could hang up, let those guys go to bed, and we could party on.
going.
But hey, speaking of that, what are we going to do to keep it going? What can we look forward to for the next podcast day, International Podcast Day? What can we look forward to this time, September 30th, next year? Are we planning anything, or what would you like to plan right now?
I'm going to take a day off.
Not on September 30th, 2015. You're
No,
not.
tomorrow. I'm beat.
I think Steve and I have talked about, over the past couple months, and I think it goes back to the international tag that we've that's going to be on this now, and creating a team involving all of us here now, plus some other individuals from the different nations, including Australia and Germany. We got a tremendous amount of feedback and support from the German podcasters in the UK, what they're doing over there, a growing industry of UK podcasters and listeners. So we want to add more people to this team so that we can have because it was, 6 a.m. our time, 6 p.m. our time, Pacific Standard Time, and Australia was already celebrating National Podcast Day. So we want to have more of like a phased in, like, okay, Australia, you start it, and it continues to travel west. So I think a little bit more work on our end, Steve and I, as far as gathering who can be part of that team, who are those those go-getters out there in those industries, and who can bring and spread the word of podcasting to their areas and internationally.
Awesome, and we sort of stopped picking podcasts, but I see Paul Colligan's in the chat room. He's got the podcast report, and I believe he's doing something after this live stream, right, to support Podcast Day, Steve?
Yeah, actually, after this, excuse me, I got a little frog here. Paul will be on YouTube Live at 6 o'clock, and it's going to be a great event. I really want everybody to go check out. And it's, Paul can probably talk more about it, but it's about how to do podcasting and free on iTunes. And it's he's tagged with National Podcast Day with it. And I believe, Paul, correct me if I'm wrong, but you also have a special gift for everybody that's on the stream as a part of National Podcast Day. But I have, if you go to nationalpodcastday.com/events, all the information's listed there and a link to his show coming up.
Yeah, awesome. Well, like I said, next year I'm hoping to maybe have that video, and hopefully we'll have some other fun things. We'll probably be doing a lot more live streaming, right? And maybe throughout the year. We did. I was getting a little confused with the National Podcast Day Twitter avatar, so I didn't switch mine because I didn't know who I was talking to. But that is certainly a thing you can do, which is really cool. And I've got the banner on the website. And you can go to nationalpodcastday.com. There's resources there for you to grab. You can change your Twitter avatar, change your whatever social media avatar you want. Put a banner on your site. Lots of things you can do throughout the year. So definitely check out nationalpodcastday.com. Nick, what are you going to do now? We'll come down to letdown while Steve is sleeping tomorrow. What are you thinking? What are we going to do to push this forward?
It was funny. I mentioned this earlier today. I wish that this was National Podcast Month, but I don't know if Steve would be able to handle that over there. But at the same time, no, I think the biggest thing for me is I've made a personal goal to, I don't know if convert is the right word, but to get 10 new people who don't know what the word podcasting is to subscribe to their first podcasts.
Awesome.
That's my goal for 2014. I'm sorry, 2015. I don't know if it'll be doable, because it does take a little bit of work, and you do need some of the devices to make it happen. But that's my goal. That's what I'm going to try to do for 2014, 2015 to convert 10 or more new people to what we do. I mean, I think what we do is fantastic, and there are so many podcasts out there for people with so many different interests that I think would be beneficial for everybody.
Awesome. All right. Well, I think that's a good way to head on out the virtual door. I think that's a good task. I think everyone should go out there and try to get a few people to subscribe to their first podcast or even a new podcast. Or if they're doing a podcast, pass on the word to do the same. Have them go check out nationalpodcastday.com. Easy for me to say. I have the frog leaped out of Steve's throat and into mine. And we'll head out here and we will, we didn't plug necessarily. Usually you open up the show and we say our own podcast. We'll do that here at the end. The focus today was National Podcast Day. Again, Steve, thanks so much for doing this, and hopefully we'll be doing another round to mark the second National Podcast Day next year. So as we go out, we will just tell us where we can find your podcast, and we will see you on the next round. Daniel.
I'm Daniel J. Lewis, host of the Audacity Podcast at theaudacitypodcast.com. And my goal, this side note here, I'm going to try to get my dad subscribed to podcasts because he's getting an iPhone 6 this month. So I'm going to see if I can turn him into a podcast consumer.
Nice. That'll be a good test. Dave, thanks for joining us, buddy.
Thank you. Find me, Dave Jackson, at schoolofpodcasting.com.
Man, always a pro. So short and sweet.
That's it.
Man, I can't even adjust my lighting. Nick, this might be your last roundtable, so make it good.
Does he get the T-shirt yet?
Never get the T-shirt.
You can check me out. I do a Bengals podcast called Inside the Jungle over at cincyjungle.com and spnt.tv.
And, of course, the guest of honor, creators of National Podcast Day, soon to be International Podcast Day, and all-around fun guys like a bear on a ball. I don't know what that means. I went to the circus recently, so I'm all confused. Dave and Steve, who are appearing on the same camera. This might be a first, a two-person, all right, camera. So you're tripping me out, but I loved it. Thanks again so much, Steve, for creating this. Thanks for working so hard on it. And until next year, let us know where we can listen to all the other content you spend the rest of your time working on.
Yeah, the rest of our time. That's at netcaststudio.com where we do podcasting. And just real quick, I want to thank everyone for their support again. And it's my pleasure. It's just my way of giving back to the communities and for an industry that we love doing. Thank you.
Awesome. Dave, you get a plug, of course.
Excellent. Yeah, I'm also a co-host with our flagship show at netcaststudio.com called The Waves of Tech.
Yeah, I've been on that show. Awesome to see that still going. You guys got a good little network over there, and everyone go check it out. Certainly, you haven't checked out all of these podcasts here, so hopefully something new for you to consume. And hit up your buddies in the chat room. The chat room has been awesome. I want to thank everybody for joining us and celebrating National Podcast Day and just podcasting in general. Google Plus is a great place to gather together and talk about podcasting all year long. The podcasters community, something we're all a part of on Google Plus. Go over there and join us there. And that's another awesome place to get practically real-time support. Ask a question and it gets answered. So lots of support there in Google Plus. On Twitter, you can find me at Podcast Helper. You got a question, answer it right there. But to go to podcastersroundtable.com, sign up to the list so that you can tell me what you'd like to talk about on a future roundtable, and we'll get you on here. All right? So that's it, everybody. Happy Podcast Day. Until next time, see you later.
Thanks.